Tonight, a national ban on abortion.
A baby is not a states' rights issue, it's a human right issue.
The proposed Senate bill to stop abortions after 15 weeks. Plus, striking a deal. The 11th hour agreement between rail companies and workers to avoid an economic disaster. And 2 years after the Abraham Accords, experts look towards a future of partnership between Israel and Iran.
We shouldn't wait until the day after the regime is gone. We should think about that day right now.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. As states begin to ban the procedure, one lawmaker looks to restrict abortion nationwide. Welcome to Faith Nation. In Washington, I'm Caitlin Burke. One of the nation's most restrictive abortion measures officially tonight in effect in Indiana. The law bans nearly all abortions from the very beginning of a pregnancy. It provides exemptions to save the life of the mother or deadly fetal anomalies up to 20 weeks. And for up to 10 weeks, there are exemptions for rape or incest. Indiana was the first state to approve abortion restrictions after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. On Capitol Hill, there's a push to restrict the procedure nationwide. Senator Lindsey Graham's newly proposed bill would ban abortions once an unborn baby can feel pain. The South Carolina Republican spoke with Capitol Hill correspondent Matt Galka about his plan.
Senator Lindsey Graham's 15-week abortion ban legislation caught some on Capitol Hill by surprise and even caused some Republicans to slowly back away from the idea of federal abortion legislation. Still, the senator hopes that the issue unites Republicans in the lead-up to November's midterms.
Graham's proposal is one of the most significant pieces of legislation Republicans have put forward since the decision overturning Roe v. Wade, making abortion a state issue. He maintains it still would be, even with a national 15-week ban on the procedure.
Is that hypocritical, though? And what I mean by that is that for 50 years we did hear from pro-life groups about it should be a state's choice. By taking away part of that choice, does that go against the argument we've heard for decades?
I don't think so. I think abortion is not a state right. A baby is not a states' rights issue, it's a human right issue.
Democrats quickly pounced as they see abortion rights as a winning issue for them in November.
The American people do not want politicians in their bedrooms and their doctor's offices. They do not want Lindsey Graham to make health care decisions for them. They want to make their own decisions.
Graham's move also led to a split with some of his fellow Republicans.
Well, I do believe it should be left to the states. That was a point of the Supreme Court decision. With regard to Senator Graham's bill, I think the fact of the matter is our Democratic colleagues don't believe in any restriction on abortion up until the time a baby is delivered. That's an extreme point of view, not shared by any civilized place on the planet. I believe that that's the contrast that he was trying to communicate.
Graham feels his colleagues would ultimately vote with him if it ever came to that.
I'm trying to say abortion on demand should stop then because the baby can feel pain. Science tells us when you poke the baby, it responds. Can you imagine what kind of death it would be to be dismembered by an abortionist? I'm trying to stop that. And you know what? If people are okay with abortion up to the moment of birth, they can vote that way. I'm not okay with that. And I'm going to push back. And I think a lot of people listening to this program are glad that people are going to push back. If we don't stand up for the 15-week-old baby, who is?
Pro-life groups celebrated the proposal, with some seeing it as an issue Republican candidates can use to take back control of Capitol Hill.
I think that this legislation is really coming at an ideal time for those who are running for federal office, especially for the U.S. Senate, so that they can say, hey, this is a first step that we can all get behind.
Senator Graham admits that he knows with the current makeup of the Senate, his bill likely would not get a floor vote, but he's confident that could change with a new Congress. At the Capitol, Matt Gelka, CBN News.
A close call for our nation's supply chain. The first U.S. railroad strike in 30 years averted tonight after a tentative deal between several railroad unions and major railway companies. CBN's Brody Carter is on the story. Brody, workers were ready to walk off the job. What changed?
Well, Caitlin, the good news, the strike slated to start at midnight is off. Today's agreement paves the way for railroad employees to vote on new contracts in the coming weeks. The White House announced a tentative agreement this morning, saying it guarantees better pay, improved work conditions, and peace of mind around healthcare costs. Now, the deal also includes a new leave policy, which is a major demand for railroad employees who feared being fired for simply taking off to go to the doctor.
The big issue that rail crews are pointing out isn't so much the pay that's the problem, but quality of life. So about half of all rail crews are expected to are basically on call 24/7. They might spend weeks away from home.
Well, the deal still faces several steps and could take weeks before it's passed. But union members have agreed not to strike, avoiding a blow to the nation's supply chain.
President Biden campaigned as a champion for the middle class and labor unions. How will the administration use this in their favor as we near the midterms?
Well, the White House is calling this a big win for the president. Crisis averted, right? But those closely watching the industry say this is a lose-lose situation for Biden. People in the freight and supply chain industry, they tell me this has been an ongoing issue for years. It's something that should have been fixed months ago, they say, as well as that the president is now crushing labor by now telling unions what to do. The president met with negotiators today in the Oval Office this morning to say job well done, and then they marked the occasion with remarks in the Rose Garden.
This agreement is validation what I've always believed. Unions and management can work together for the benefit of everyone. Our nation's rail system is the backbone of our supply chain. Everything you rely on, and it's hard to realize this, from everything from clean water to food to gas to liquefied natural gas to everything, every good that you need seems to end up on a rail getting delivered to where it needs to go.
The president emphasizing there the impact a strike would have had. In the coming weeks, we will see a final vote of this deal. But for now, railroad employees and those unions, those members excited tonight about coming pay raises as well, and the new freedom to call off from work without being penalized or even worse, fired. Caitlin?
Thanks, Brody. New jobless claims hit a 4-month low. According to today's figures from the Labor Department, 213,000 Americans applied for new unemployment benefits last week. That's down from 5,000 the week before, and the fewest applications since May. Overall, about 1.4 million people are receiving jobless benefits across the country. Here with us now to talk about all of it is Mark Hamrick, Senior Economic Analyst and Washington Bureau Chief at Bankrate. Mark, the fewest new jobless claims since May. What does that say about the state of the jobs market in America?
It indicates that even the workers who are being laid off, and those numbers are relatively few, although they have been rising this year, those people are, for the most part, able to find work pretty quickly. And Caitlin, we think back to the large number of job openings in this country, most recently reported at above 11 million. That compares to the official number of unemployed at 6 million. So we have nearly 2 job openings for every single unemployed person. And so far, amid the many tumultuous developments in the economy, with inflation leading sort of the highest negative influence, the job market remains the most elegant part of the economy, at least as it relates to job security.
Now let's talk about mortgage rates. The cost of buying a home is still through the roof, and mortgage rates have now nearly doubled in 9 months. What does that mean for home buyers?
It's a miserable situation. Housing affordability has really sunk to the lowest level in years, and these mortgage interest rates are at the highest level since 2008, above 6% this week, according to Bankrate, the second straight week we're seeing that, and it likely means more pain for the housing market. We've had 6 straight months of declining new or existing home sales, and we don't know where we're going to level out in terms of peaking with mortgage rates. If they go higher from here, we could see some more pain in the housing market.
I know a lot of people are watching that, and a lot of people are watching the stock market, which saw its biggest sell-off in 2 years on Tuesday. What's your advice for those watching Wall Street and getting a little worried?
Well, this is a direct reflection of the battle against inflation, which is not yet being won. And there obviously are fears about a recession. For long-term investors, for people who are really in the market to save for retirement and have a long time horizon, they really need to stay invested and continue to buy into this market because they're getting in at lower price points rather than higher, where the bargains were relatively few when the market was rallying strongly and hitting new records. If there is a recession, the market will continue to struggle, but at some point it will resume the rally and we'll be talking about new highs for stocks, but we have no idea about the timing of any of that. That's a guessing game at this point.
All right, well, we're going to keep talking to you about it so that you can keep us up to date on the latest as we're all guessing. Bankrate's Mark Hamrick, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
A partnership between Israel and Iran, how Elon Musk could help make it happen when Faith Nation returns. Years ago, the threat posed by Iran led to a historic partnership between Israel and 3 Arab countries, which resulted in the Abraham Accords. Although the agreement created new regional opportunities, the Iranian threat has grown. While the Islamic regime vows to destroy Israel, it was interestingly a Persian king who liberated the Jewish people centuries ago. Now, experts believe building on that ancient relationship could be the true secret to peace in the Middle East.
We just cannot permit the betrayal of our society and our country.
It's hard for Americans in 2022 to imagine what Iran was like when I was born in Tehran myself.
More than 40 years ago, Iran and Israel shared a mutually cooperative relationship, the two countries working together in areas like economic development, agriculture, and healthcare. CBN News national security contributor Eli Kohanim experienced that partnership firsthand.
My own father had conducted business with an Israeli company where he had brought in Israeli water engineers who were already at the time the most advanced in the world.
That relationship turned hostile during the 1979 Islamic Revolution when Ayatollah Khomeini took power. 4 decades later, the Abraham Accords proves partnership between Israel and its Arab neighbors is possible and even profitable. Now, some former State Department officials believe the natural next step could involve the Iranians themselves.
The people see the benefits of deals like the Abraham Accords that their neighbors are reaping. So they see the new jobs, the healthcare benefits, the economic benefits, and they're asking themselves, well, why shouldn't we get some of those benefits of cooperating with Israel?
There are protests going on right now. And that's why speaking out in support of them is so important, and why offering them, an opportunity, to say you don't have to be a pariah, you don't have to be isolated, and, a deal like this could come to be.
As far-fetched as a partnership between Iran and Israel sounds, former U.S. Deputy National Security Advisor Victoria Coates and former advisor to the U.S. Representative for Iran, Len Khodorkovsky, say it's not just possible, it's the inevitable path to peace in the Middle East.
75 years ago, if I told you Germany, Japan, and Israel would be 3 of our greatest friends and democracies and capitalist partners and huge economies, you would have told me I was crazy. It's simply impossible to imagine. Yet here we are.
The two proponents have dubbed this potential peace deal the Cyrus Accords.
Cyrus the Great, who was a Persian king that liberated the Jewish people from Babylon and allowed them to go back to, their traditional homeland and build their temple. He even financed the rebuilding of the Jewish temple in Jerusalem.
That act of inclusion and tolerance, has always been held up as an example of what is possible in cooperation between people of different faiths but similar morals and values.
To get here, Coates and Khodorkovsky admit the current Islamic regime will likely have to go. And it may surprise you who they think could help make that happen.
Well, curiously, the answer may lie with none other than Elon Musk.
I was not expecting you to say that.
Elon's been in the news a lot recently, but one of the things that he has done is deploy a satellite-based internet service, which is called Starlink.
Operated by Musk's company SpaceX,
Starlink consists of a network of more than 2,000 private satellites. It's touted as being able to offer high-speed internet anywhere on Earth.
Bringing in uninterruptible and uncorruptible internet access that would not make its users targets, but rather allow them to communicate with each other, because that's the way the regime has stayed in power, is they literally will cut off the internet for days at a time and prevent people from communicating. And if they can communicate, they can coordinate.
In February, Musk was able to provide internet access to Ukraine, even as Russia attempted to jam all signals. A move Ukrainian military leaders say has kept critical lines of communication open.
The people of Iran want to live in a free and democratic country. And what the United States and Western powers need to do is to support the Iranian people in their quest for freedom.
We shouldn't wait until the day after the regime is gone. We should think about that day right now and prepare for that day, build those people-to-people ties, build business ties, create cultural connections, work on practical projects that could potentially be turned on the day after the regime is gone.
Coates and Khodorkovsky agree it's ultimately up to the Iranian people to take back their country. And amid reports of growing unrest, they believe that day could be coming. Hunger in the Horn of Africa. When we come back, the shocking death rate and what's being done to fight the famine. Famine not seen in more than 40 years is now ravaging the Horn of Africa. A perfect storm of back-to-back droughts, COVID-19, and fallout from the Ukraine war have combined to create the dire conditions. George Thomas reports from Kenya.
Fatuma Abdi Aluhu has just buried her 2 sons here on the outskirts of Mogadishu, Somalia. She lays a thorny branch on their graves to protect the bodies from wild animals. Both died from starvation.
I wanted to die before them so they could bury me, but both of them died before me.
Somalia and its neighbors in the Horn of Africa, including Ethiopia and Kenya, are facing unprecedented drought conditions.
We've had 4 failed rains. The drought that we're currently seeing in the Horn of Africa is the worst drought in over 40 years.
On average, 1 person dies every 48 seconds from hunger in the Horn of Africa.
Because of the drought, many water sources have dried up. Many wells have also dried up.
With crops failing, the United Nations says some 22 million people are at risk of starvation. Many of them farmers who only grow enough food to feed their own families.
People will be forced to flee to look for food. People will have to try and find a way to survive. And obviously this entails very perilous journeys for people who are already marginalized.
Many in the region who rely on livestock for livelihood have seen massive numbers of their animals wiped out.
For example, in northern Kenya, we've lost about 1.5 million heads of livestock. Similarly, in southern Ethiopia, we've lost over 2 million. In Somalia, we even stopped counting.
In Somalia alone, around 8 million people, or half the population, are experiencing crisis hunger levels. 1 in 3 children face chronic malnutrition.
I've been shocked to my core these past few days by the level of pain and suffering we see so many Somalis enduring. Famine is at the door.
Anne Kasambo oversees CBN's offices in Kenya. In partnership with Operation Blessing, they've been distributing food and other aid supplies to some of the hardest hit regions of her country.
It's been quite devastating in some communities, and especially in the arid areas where even when there's rain, food is hard to come by because they're not able to grow their food.
4 consecutive droughts and African economies still reeling from the coronavirus pandemic have created these dire conditions.
As if that was not enough, the situation has been aggravated by the current conflict in Europe between Russia and Ukraine.
Before the war, Somalia imported 90% of its wheat from Russia and Ukraine, while Ethiopia imported 42%. Kenya, which also imports oil, iron, steel, and fertilizers from Russia and Ukraine, imports 44% of its wheat from both countries. All that has come to a screeching halt since war started. The result? Skyrocketing prices for practically everything.
It has really affected us, especially on food prices. It has also affected the cost of fuel.
When the fuel prices go up, the production cost is higher, so everything is affected.
A new survey found most Kenyans are increasingly turning to their savings or taking out loans in order to meet the rising cost of living.
It's been a build-up from COVID to inflation, to drought, to the war in Ukraine. So just before one situation gets better, another one crops up.
In late August, the first ship carrying grain from Ukraine docked on the Horn of Africa, offloading some 2,300 tons of wheat.
That's enough wheat to feed 1.5 million people for about a month.
Food experts say that's a drop in the bucket, considering the immediate crisis facing millions across the Horn of Africa. George Thomas, CBN News, Nairobi, Kenya.
Coming up, Chick-fil-A to the rescue. How one employee went above and beyond next. Finally tonight, Chick-fil-A employees are known to go above and beyond, and one Florida worker did just that by saving a woman and her baby during an attempted carjacking. The woman was in the Chick-fil-A parking lot getting the baby out of the car when a man approached and threatened her. An employee noticed and immediately jumped into action, tackling the would-be carjacker to the ground. After taking the man into custody, authorities thanked the Chick-fil-A Good Samaritan for his courage. Above and beyond indeed. That's going to do it for Faith Nation. We'll see you tomorrow.